right. Welcome to Data Tools for Everyone, connecting strategy, practice, and impact. We're so excited to have folks here today as a part of this series. And as people are coming in really quickly, if you want to go into the chat and just share your name and your organization. And just as an icebreaker today, if you were to describe a carbonated beverage, what word would you use? Some people say soda, some people say pop. Where I come from, you just call them Cokes. It doesn't matter if they're Sprite or Coke or something else. So let's just have a sense of who's in the room today. Name, organization, pop, Northern Indiana. Yeah. Soda. See? Soda. And there's other words too. I don't know. What are some other words? I might be the only one who called it Coke. Cokes. Aha, Texas. Maybe that's where we got it from. Great to see all of these folks too from such great organizations. I think soda's winning the day so far, I have to say. But, you know, there's nothing wrong with being in the minority and how you describe your Cokes. Well, I will soon be introducing our team, but for myself, I'm Jen Rose Fitzgerald, and I'm the program manager for Data for Social Impact. And I'm excited to share the space today with everyone here, including co-presenters Shayna Lee and Yash Singh from DataKind and Sarah Freimiller from Legal Services of Eastern Missouri. And next slide. So speaking of who's in the room and what kind of language you use, we have people in the room geographically diverse. If you want to switch to the next slide, Shayna. Thank you so much. We have a great representation today from the St. Louis region and also from lots of regions and time zones and countries. And whether it's 10 a.m. where you are, that's where it is where I am, or whatever time it is, I just want to thank everyone for being here. We've had a really great response from people across lots of social sector organizations, the top being, in this case, NGOs, academic, or local and state government, and a lot of sectors as well. In terms of working with data, how do you work with data? Working with data is the primary role of 36%, and that means for the rest of you, it's not your primary role. For most of you, it is something that working with data is something that affects your work, but is not your primary role. And for a few of you, you have little or no interaction with data, but we thank you for being here anyway. So great to have that range of folks in the room today. Next slide. So just a quick agenda for today. We're in this first part, welcome intro, hi. And then what we're gonna do is Sarah Freimiller from Legal Services of Eastern Missouri is gonna get us started with some different ways to use this tool called Ladder, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then we'll hear some other examples of how social sector organizations are using this tool and some technical tips and best practices for using Ladder, which a lot of people have asked about. And we just dipped our toe in the water of that in the last session. We'll have a chance for a Q&A, and there will be a demo walkthrough so that you can actually, if you haven't used it yet, you can actually walk through with Yash and practice and just learn by doing and just do an example of what it is to use the tool. You'll be delighted at how simple it is, I think. So that's what we're doing today. So as I said, I am the program manager for Data for Social Impact. And this is an initiative of the Center for Social Development at the Brown School at Washington University in St. Louis. And this was founded with support from MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth and formed in close partnership with the Community Innovation and Action Center at the University of St. Louis. That is a mouthful. But the purpose of the initiative is to build capacity and connectivity among social sector organizations that are working to increase their impact for and with the communities they serve. So while lots of initiatives focus on building technical skills, and that's obviously important, we recognize that leveraging data to have an impact is as much about process and translational skills as it is about technical skills. So we also have a motto that everyone is a data person. And that's why we ask you that question, what is your relationship with data? We understand that data is too important to be left only to the experts, as it were, because we're all experts on something. And so we really focus on cultivating collaboration and equitable data practices in the social sector. And whatever your role in your organization, we all have a part to play in this. So that is what we do. How do we do this? First, our approach is rooted in the feedback that we get from social sector practitioners. So we build relationships and gather feedback in a variety of ways, from interviews to advisory committees to public roundtables, and then we create programming based on what we hear. And for this series in particular, Rachel Wells from DataKind had presented some tools at our summit in May, and we heard from people in our network that they were really interested in learning more, that they're interested in more broadly in accessible tools that they can use that are free, that are user-friendly, and tools they could use in collaboration with each other, with other organizations, and that they could get some support if they needed it. So the series hopefully answers that call. And it's had a great response so far, so I think it is. If you're joining us for the first time today, just as a refresher on what Ladder is, today's session will go a little bit deeper into Ladder. So if you're joining for the first time, Ladder is a new free mapping analysis platform from DataKind, and it is designed to make community data more accessible and actionable. So there's a lot of fragmented local data and insights, and it turns them into more actionable insights to help if you're a service provider, public administrator, policymaker, to identify, say, high need areas or to target outreach or to provide services or strengthen partnerships. It turns data into more actionable avenues for doing those things. And some of the features include the ability for local leaders to analyze public and uploaded data. And then they also have the ability to create teams within the platform so that they can collaborate, which we will talk about today. So a quick reminder about how the webinar works. If we'll have a Q&A, so you can use the Q&A feature rather than the chat to ask questions. Is that right, Shayna? Yeah, we want to use the Q&A. We'll try to catch them in the chat, but sometimes things are flying in the chat. And so if you use the Q&A, they'll definitely get your questions answered. The microphones will stay muted unless there's a specific moment when people are invited to give feedback. We will send a recording in a post-event email. And then we hope you will attend and share about the remaining webinar, which is December 9th. And then I just want to turn the microphone over to Sarah Freimiller from Legal Services of Eastern Missouri. Sarah has been really playing around with the Ladder tool, and I'm really excited to hear what they have to say.
Awesome. Thank you, Jen Rose. I'm so excited to share with you all. Don't worry, we will not be reading word by word on this slide. I'm just going to pretty immediately share the Ladder tool and talk through some different examples. And oops, I think I can't, I'll need to steal the sharing abilities. There we go. So just a bit about me. I come from a background in higher ed. I was a college counselor before I went to WashU for social work. So it's fun to see some WashU social work students in the room. And then I work currently at Legal Services of Eastern Missouri, which provides free civil legal aid to people who can't otherwise afford it. So I saw this at a conference, saw Ladder at a conference called Bridging Data Divides that WashU put on, and I felt slightly electrified in the room. I just remember thinking, oh, I can't wait to run back and share this with my team. And so one of the big ways that Ladder can immediately get you going with your understanding of data is just being able to look at the existing publicly available data sets that are already included. An example of this is when I had some of our legal interns come to me and say, hey, tell us more about the population we serve, which is a broad question. And so that led to a lot of follow-up questions from me about, well, which programs are you working with? An example was some of the interns were working with our public benefits program. So they were really helping people get access to their SNAP benefits. And so an indicator that exists is in the nutrition section of the indicators, and it's percent households receiving food stamps or SNAP. So we've got both regular, kind of like all ages, and then households that have children under 18 years. So pretty much as soon as you click on the indicator, it populates that map for you. Um, Interesting. Usually it does. I'm not sure why it's not, but let's try another indicator. Oh, it's because I'm on county. So you might need to play around and see which indicators are available based on your boundary. So back to nutrition, households receiving SNAP. While I'm showing you this, I wanted to kind of frame the three main categories that I've been thinking of when I think about my own ladder use. And they're kind of like explore, compare, and share. Or if you like a rhyming theme, it could be like explore, compare, share. So these are the households receiving SNAP benefits, and ladders very interactive. You can mouse over each of these zip codes and see the zip code itself listed, the percent of households receiving SNAP, and then also it reminds you of the source. So this is coming from the US Census Bureau. It's from 2022. So that is just an example of how you can dive right into ladder, you can play around with the different indicators, and you can just look at items existing on the map. Something that I saw that was really cool as well was the ability to have multiple indicators pulled up at the same time and to see that cross section. So if people wanted to look at the intersection of receiving food stamps and also um, self-rated health status, they could click on two indicators at the same time. It does take me a little time to kind of mentally orient myself to this overlay, but once you've got it, it's really interesting. So in this instance, I'm saying, okay, if I'm interested in the overlap of where a lot of people are receiving SNAP and a lot of people are saying, I would rate myself, my health status poor, then you're looking at this kind of purple color here. And so you can see that it's more so concentrated, and you can also click and drag the map. It's more concentrated in our northern zip codes and also in East St. Louis. And you can see, oh, it might also be that they're in kind of the mid-range of receiving SNAP, but a much higher percent are rating themselves poor health status. And the nice thing is, like when you mouse over it, you can see both of those indicators listed on the card. All right, so that was Explayer. And I think any data tool that you are using, I would recommend, using your own like regional research. So like when I moved to St. Louis, I remember hearing about the podcast We Live Here and reading The Color of Law. And so like wherever you're getting your data, there's always this deep historical context that it can lead you to. So I'd really recommend, thinking about like as you're looking at the map, okay, does this make sense with what I know of the region, about segregation, about existing resources? And then you can get a much deeper understanding of the questions that you want to ask. All right, so moving on to our compare, I had a recent request. Also, I'm going to clear these. If you don't clear an indicator, it will hold on to it and it will continue showing you that indicator. But I had a recent request from our outreach director saying, like, I would love to have a map of the outreaches that we completed in 2024. I want to know what areas we're covering and what areas we could do more work on. And so in this case, something I'm interested in is, well, what do the populations look like of our different zip codes? Where are the areas that are more heavily populated, and what do our outreaches look like in those areas? So in this case, we've got a general population indicator. and we've got the count of total population from the 2022 census, or the 5-year estimates. So it looks like it hasn't quite cleared the card. Okay, now it's updated. I can see that some of my most populous zip codes are 63116 in South City. We've got 63136. And basically, as you get kind of outside of the like urban core of St. Louis, the county is much more densely populated. But we tend to concentrate our services more so in this kind of central St. Louis area. And so I created an indicator that was based on our outreach data from our internal database. It's called Legal Server. And all right, it's in the other category for me. So, and I know that Yash will show like how to create these indicators. It did take me a little playing around. So I will again echo, like the more that you just try things, the better you get at this tool and the more sense it makes. And I definitely created and deleted some indicators throughout. So I think by investing maybe like an hour and a half of playing around with the tool, I went from kind of like crawling stage to like toddling walking stage in my comfort level with it. So I'd really recommend just giving yourself that time and seeing what you get. So basically, once I pulled our data set and uploaded the indicator, mapped it here, I decided to look at the total number of outreaches. So the circle sizes here are related to how many outreaches total. And you can also see down here, it shows you, okay, it ranges from 1, which is this little purple dot, to greater than 3.5. So it gives you, it makes sure that if you have more than 3.5, that dot isn't like swallowing the entire map, which could be a real problem if you have something like our court tables, which happen at the Civil Courts building, and we have 126 of those recorded for 2024. So like that would have swallowed the map if we hadn't had it kind of filtered to only show greater than 3.5. And so it's interesting seeing here, okay, we tend to have more outreaches in this kind of central area, but the population is slightly less dense than these other zip codes. But we do have some outreaches. We've got like one outreach here at Bayless Elementary School. We've had one at St. Mary's Southside Catholic High School. So we also have up here, oop, um, a kind of a string of outreaches along this road. And I'm forgetting the specific road that my coworker said, oh, that's probably this, this avenue that runs along and has a lot of kind of connectivity in that region. So this is an example of how we can have this image of, okay, this is what our outreach looked like in 2024. But I think one of actually the great benefits that I got from this specific activity was realizing how much work we need to do on our internal data collection. Because actually, this is only 24% of our outreaches for 2024. We didn't have kind of functional addresses listed for the other like 76%. So I actually contacted our outreach coordinator and said, I think we need to edit our internal system to make it so that we've got it broken down by, address, street, state, zip, so that we can actually map things accurately. So I think Ladder, even if you get something that you wish you could see more with your data, it'll tell you kind of what you need to have a more powerful tool and how you can edit your internal systems in that way. So I really liked that exercise. And then something I just did yesterday for the first time was I shared the data with an internal team. So when you come up here, let me again cancel out of my indicators. Boop-doo. When you come up here, you can see I've got these little teams here. So I created these yesterday. All it takes is add new team, and you can create the team name. I'm going to create one that is contract for deed, which is another kind of case that we're curious about. And it says no indicators available. It's okay. I haven't created any specific indicators yet, but the existing publicly available indicators are still up here in their categories. So I'm going to go back and switch back to, in this case, HEDGI, which is our Health and Education Justice Initiative. And they reached out to me and they asked, hey, we would love to have a map of foster care facilities in St. Louis. And so what they had was a Word document that had just a list of like a paragraph, comma separated of the different facilities. They didn't have addresses. They would maybe have a parenthetical like, oh, West County. But they didn't really have it in Excel form or, map form. And so I converted it. Thankfully, there were only 24 of them, so it wasn't too long of a process. But I did create an Excel so I could upload it to Ladder. And I created the Hedgie resources. So this is an example of asset mapping, which I love about Ladder. So you can see if you hover over them, the names of them and their location. And so this is something I'm really excited about because I went in and I added all three members of the team. And I'm meeting with them tomorrow morning and I'm planning on showing them how they can upload additional indicators because that's something you can do with Ladder. Like once you've created your set of indicators, then you can say, all right, I've got 5 more. I don't want to delete and re-upload. So I'm just going to upload these 5 separately and they're going to map them the same way. So that's a way that I hope they can keep, adding to their own resource internally and have a really strong tool for visualizing the existence of like foster care facilities. Or if they wanted to add maybe like a boundary-based indicator, looking at rates of homelessness for people under 18, like that could be something that we could do as a team that would give them a really interesting look at where they want to like work with existing resources to meet the need. All right, so that's an example of sharing internally. And then something that I actually don't have working yet, but would like to, is I've mentioned this contract for deed situation, where we have an actor who's nationally known for a contract for deed scam that he's running. And we're trying to work with other organizations, including WashU, to kind of um, shut him down. So we have a list of the properties that he has been trying to like slow flip with people. And we are trying to kind of track where those are and see also, are these falling in neighborhoods that are like a higher percentage Black or African American? Can we like prove some type of like intent to like discriminate based on like income or race. So looking at where these properties are falling in St. Louis could be really useful in the context of the Ladder tool. So that's an example of sharing externally. And so, yeah, those are my 4 examples. And I want to emphasize that this wasn't really in my life before this summer, but now that we have it, I think I'm just going to see more and more requests from our teams to use it because it's such a cool useful tool that like gives people that immediate grasp on a visualization of what they're working on and areas for potential improvement or areas where we can go deeper on our own data and say, okay, we need to start doing things differently if we want to have a more robust data set. So thank you, Ladder. Thanks for being here.
Okay, thanks so much, Sarah. I'm gonna toggle between switching screens. Can someone give me a thumbs up if they're able to see my screen? Okay, perfect, perfect. Well, thank you, Sarah, so much for sharing those examples of how you and your organization is using Ladder. And for those that are just joining this webinar for the first time, I'm Shayna Lee, Senior Director of U.S. Communities here at DataKind. We're a global nonprofit organization that's really focused on using data, technology, and AI for positive social impact. Ladder is one of the tools that we co-created that Sarah just spoke about with a social impact organization. And ultimately, success for us is when DataKind and our partners have created those data-driven solutions that are adopted widely and contribute positively to solving social sector level problems. So when we partner for social impact, we keep these principles in mind that there are solutions that are within a human-centered design where we prioritize ethics and equity from the start. We design solutions that are accessible and enable actionable insights within a community. We keep in mind cost efficiency, thinking about sustainability, mitigating operating and environmental costs, and then making sure that we're creating trustworthy solutions with secure by design practices and ensuring human in the loop in design. So when we first started developing Ladder, it began with partners in Central Florida, including Second Harvest Food Bank of Central Florida. The conversation really started with a question. Could we analyze local data to identify regions where there's a high need for outreach, but perhaps low coverage of services? This would ultimately enable community organizations to better provide outreach to individuals and families, in this case, experiencing food insecurity. And so this continued to evolve over time, really toward an ambitious vision of creating a commercial competitive free tool to support organizations through mapping analysis and collaborative features. This ultimately enabling the understanding of complex community needs and providing those actionable insights. So you've heard from Sarah some great ways that they've been looking at utilizing Ladder, and I'd like to share a couple more examples. So since the time we thought of the idea and started thinking through prototypes and subsequently building out Ladder, we've continued partnership with organizations like Second Harvest Food Bank of Central Florida. In this example, they and local leaders are currently aligning on common local metrics to pinpoint where food insecurity and poor health and outcomes overlap, which ultimately can help then, once they get that aligning, to support innovative approaches like their Food is Medicine program and targeting outreach where it matters most within their community. There was also use of Ladder to identify potential donation partners within the food banks to ensure coordination and distribution with nearby locations. And this past summer, DataKind was able to attend the inaugural Feeding America conference, their sourcing operations and neighbor access conference, which hosts their network of 200 plus food banks to demo the tool and look for alignment within their Map the Meal Gap data efforts. We also engaged with a cohort of community service providers within New York, New Jersey, and Utah to train them on Ladder. And in 2026, we're excited to have deeper engagement to identify specific use cases. This past summer, we engaged with housing partners within government, community organizations, and intermediaries from California to inform our future product roadmap of Ladder. So, as an example, they recognize that within housing, there can be a lot of niche hyperlocal housing data that's really specific to communities, where the ability to upload that data along with seeing public data sources available is highly valuable. We're also in the process of identifying additional use cases that we plan to share next year as we engage with more organizations. Use case themes that we're seeing emerging are within economic mobility initiatives, such as working with organizations who directly provide resources to small businesses along their journey, including those who are underserved. This is key, recognizing their importance within the economic ecosystem, within local communities. We're also continuing engagement with community organizations who either work specifically within their organization to identify services and partnerships gaps, but also with those organizations who are involved in cross-sector partnerships, who are aligning around a common local initiative to improve community outcomes. And through this partnership with the Data for Social Impact team here in St. Louis, gathering learnings from this webinar series that we have been hosting to understand best practices that support organizations in utilizing tools, building capacity, connection, and ultimately also engaging in collaborative data practices. So with that said, I'd like to ask you all a quick poll, if you don't mind. This will be anonymous. I'm going to actually display this poll just based on what you've heard from myself as well as Sarah. Very curious to get your thoughts on how you could envision utilizing this tool. There's a few options here. You can select what resonates most with you. Is it to create maps using what's already existing within Ladder, like the public data sets? Are you interested in uploading data to map alongside those existing public data sets? Is it working across teams within your organization to create those maps? Is it working collaboratively across organizations to create maps? So we're just going to allow a couple of seconds for people to participate, and we'll share the results and see where we all fall. Again, this is anonymous. We'll share the themes around where people are thinking about using Ladder based on what's been shared. All right, we'll give it a couple of more seconds. By the way, if you actually see an option on here, or actually if you don't see an option in terms of how you might envision using Ladder, feel free to share that in the chat if there's a different option that's not represented here. So we're going to go ahead and end and share the results. So we can see here there is definitely lots of interest in using uploaded data to map alongside existing public indicators. Certainly there's interest in just using the existing indicators, which is okay as well. And then in third place, we're seeing lots of good responses around working across teams. So thanks so much for sharing your thoughts on that. Just want to get a pulse check there. Let's see. Let me make sure I'm toggling back. Sorry, my toolbar can get in the way of the share screen. So let's see if by chance anyone put into the chat other ways that they might see using Ladder. Just going to do a quick check. No comments yet, but that is okay. So ultimately, throughout the various engagements that I've talked about, the examples that Sarah has shared, we've learned a lot from users already. And in this next section, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Yash Singh, who is the platform manager of Ladder, to talk about some tips and tricks that can be helpful as you're using it. So Yash, I'll turn it over to you and you can share screen.
Great. Thank you, Shayna, and welcome everyone. I'm going to share my screen so you can see what I'm talking about. So for this section, as mentioned before, I'll be diving a little bit more into detail about how to use the Teams features and how to prepare data properly when you're first thinking about approaching Ladder. So to start, we want to just be very clear about the different aspects of the data and how it interacts with our platform. The tool owner and steward of the data will be DataKind, but the data owners will be you, the users. We want to ensure that you have every right to delete the data, remove the data, revoke sharing privileges. That's all within your control on the platform. And then again, data sharing, if you want to share it with folks within your organization or otherwise, it's only who you grant permission to, and that's within your control. And then as far as the security of your data goes, this data is encrypted at rest, which generally speaking means that the data, when it's stored in our database, is incomprehensible. And you can only retrieve it with a specific key that we use for application. And yeah, that's generally how that works. So taking a step back, why did we decide to add this Teams feature to Ladder? We recognize in speaking with different social impact organizations that data exists within silos, within and across institutions, which can sometimes limit the effectiveness of making data-driven decisions. And this functionality that you might be familiar with across other tools typically comes with paid licenses and is not always compatible, with other platforms and can be kind of difficult to work with or find. And so from the feedback that we got, as well as ongoing feedback, we've recognized the need for this feature on our tool, and we've even gotten more feedback suggesting that an ability to form cross-functional teams would be a game changer. So briefly, before I jump into demonstrating it on the tool itself, I want to just highlight what you can do with teams on the platform today. And Sarah mentioned some of this already. You can create a new team. This is a group of folks that you want to share information with, share data with, that you trust to share the information with. You can invite people to join a team. This is only if you are the team owner. You can also share and unshare data with a team if you are the team owner or if you're another role called a contributor, someone who is there to add data to the mix, but you're not necessarily the owner of that team. And then lastly, everyone who is invited into the team can view that data, add it to the map as demonstrated, and visualize it, interact with the map, and pretty much do anything with it. And then, of course, you can join a team, you can leave a team, and you can even delete data that you yourself have uploaded to your team's resources. So now I want to dive into a little bit of a demonstration to show you guys, again, how this works, but then also how you can fit your initial steps of adding data into Ladder and how to think about teams when you go about it. So let's say you've registered for Ladder. When you arrive at the home page, you arrive at this landing page, which is our analysis page, where you can select from one of the 50 or more public indicators, but also as you start to create that practice for yourself and you upload data, you can also begin to integrate and combine some of those internal or private indicators that you have. So let's say you arrive at Ladder for the first time. You can certainly explore the different indicators that are available, but let's say you want to figure out what this whole Teams thing is about, right? You want to understand how you can share it with the people who want this information as well within your own team. So as demonstrated, you can add a new team here. I won't go through that step again, but you can see there's multiple teams that I have even within my thing, some for testing, some within DataKind. And so you can have different teams even within your own organization. It doesn't have to be a share with everyone kind of scenario. But once you have a team, the next step you might encounter is maybe uploading data so you can share it with your team. And to do so, you would go to this button in the top right to upload. And once you do that, it'll encourage you to add a data set. I'll add one that I use for Ladder myself. And then you have two options. Obviously, if you're new, you want to add a new indicator and upload that. But if you have an existing one, let's say that your data has been updated or a report has been generated and you want to upload to an existing indicator, you can also do that as well, and we will validate that for you. Once you do that, you'll be prompted to do a little bit of matching for what your interest really is. So in this case, the data that I'm uploading is at the county level, as you can kind of see with this preview. And the source, let's just make stuff up for now, but you can make that relevant to whatever the source is for you. And then the next step will be to actually match this up with how Ladder frames data within its own platform. So when you think about county name, this is going to pull down a drop-down menu of all the columns that you have with the data set that you've uploaded. So if you see here in the top, there's county, state, and other numerical values that you might want to add. So you want to match the county column with Ladder to the county column here for you, which is easy, but that sometimes can be a slight mishap for folks. And then state to state. And once you have that, we're able to geocode it to an ID. And then lastly, you want to indicate what data points you actually want to upload here for that region. So when you think of a particular county, right, you have things like you have numerical values you might want, but that's specific to that individual row. So let's just add a demo here. And then you want to select the value that you have. So this is the numerical value that will actually display. It'll control the shading of the map. It'll control what happens when you hover over a county and you see that numerical value. So in this case, we're working with, let's say, a rate value. And it would fall underneath population, let's say. This drop down here is the different categories you will see on the map analysis page. So if you want it to appear for you in a specific space, let's say you work mostly in nutrition and this data set correlates directly to that, you want to go ahead and select that. In this case, it's more relevant to population, so it's going to appear in that drop down later when I show you. Lastly, you want to include units. This will just help for visibility, both for you and across your team. So in this case, we're using a rate, and we're going to call it something made up. And then lastly, there's a neat little feature here you can add, which is a note, right? So when that tooltip pops up, you will get the county name, you'll get the county ID, you'll also get the value for this indicator that you've added, but also you can add a little note. So let's say you want to add a specific note about each county, or there's something important about this record of information, or you want to elaborate on the description of this indicator. You can add that here. For this case, I will not. Then the next step is to run the validation. So our platform Ladder has to validate that this data can be both geocoded, but it also but that the numerical values and that you're adding actually match to what you're trying to do, right? So in this case, a rate has to be a rate. It can't be, let's say, a string of letters or a name or something like that, right? And similar, if you're trying to add a numerical value, like the amount of funding or small business funding that went into an area, we want to make sure that has an actual correlation to what a dollar and cent amount would look like, and again, not like something out of the ordinary. And so you will see, and you might come across some exceptions, and I'll talk through some kind of tips or ways to avoid as many of these exceptions as you can. But we want to be as transparent that some aspects of your data might not get validated or might not get matched directly, and that's okay. If you want to try again, we encourage you to take a look at the data again here. You'll see there might be missing columns, there might be missing data, there might be data with a period or a weird exclamation mark in there or something, or you might just find that the numerical value you're trying to upload is not. So we encourage you to both look here visually, but you can also download this as a CSV file and explore that and analyze it again to see how you can maybe try uploading it again. But there will be some values that might not validate exactly with our geocoder, and that's something that we are working to improve on as well as a platform. But once you feel satisfied that you have enough of the data that you want, you can go ahead and upload your indicator. Once that's processed, it'll prompt you, it'll say it's been uploaded successfully, and you can now get started with using that indicator. So this data specifically at the county level is for the state of Florida. So if you want to go to the map, one thing I saw in the chat about a question is how do you get to the area you're interested in? Yes, it will like save the area that you are located in if you allow the site to do that. If you don't want to do that, you can also just click don't allow in the top right here when it pops up on your browser. But in this case, if you want to just drill down into a specific area, you can search that here, and you can search cities, addresses, states, whatever, and it'll zoom to kind of cover the region that you're interested in. So once you do that, you can see here that you have your numerical values. And so you can see the name of the county, you can see the county code, and you can see that rate that we're talking about here, as well as the source and the year, so that you can track it and that your teammates can also track it. Shayna, keep me honest if there's questions in the chat that I can answer, just come off mute and let me know. I want to make sure that I'm addressing it at the right stage if I can.
Yeah,
But once you do that,
oh,
go ahead.
sorry, I was
Please.
going to say, there are some questions that we'll get to in a couple of minutes after your presentation. So yeah, feel free, Yash.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah, so as I mentioned, now that you've uploaded your first data set, first, congratulations. Second thing you want to do is probably share it with your colleagues, right? And the way to do that is to, again, you automatically, by default, when you sign up for Ladder, you generate a team. And so in this case, I have a team called Yasha's team. And so when you want to select or deselect, you can choose between the different teams you have at any given point. But this is what that menu is for. When you want to explore what your team actually looks like, you go into team settings and you arrive at this page. One, you can edit the team name. The next thing is to add team members, right? So in this case, you might want to add folks within your organization who also, want to see this data, or you want to save them time from uploading the data themselves to Ladder, or they simply don't have access to it, but they have the permissions to access it. And so you'll see here that you can enter their email. For purposes of this demonstration, Shayna, I'm going to add you to my team. But you'll see the three roles I kind of alluded to earlier, right? Team owner can be someone who manages other users specifically, but also can upload and share data and can view the data. Contributor is the next highest level, which is someone who can upload data and can even request data sharing from the owner. The last one is a viewer. So this is someone who you maybe don't want tinkering around with the data, or someone you want to protect from certain permissions on the site, but can view everything that you're sharing with them. And so if I want to add Shayna as a contributor in this case, I'll click add. And what that will do is it'll fire off an email to Shayna's inbox. And it'll be an invitation saying you've been invited to join a team on Ladder. When prompted, it'll take you to either our registration site if you're not already logged in or registered, or it'll take you directly to this team's page. And once you do that, I believe the steps are if you register, then you have to simply verify your email. So you go back to your inbox and you'll verify it, a similar pathway to other tools you might be familiar with. And then once you have that, you are able to work and access the different indicators in the map. And so the last thing I want to share here as well is how sharing indicators actually works, right? So you're seeing those pop up when you upload them. You're seeing them on the map page. There's one more handy dandy page here called the indicators page, which is where you'll see all the indicators that you've uploaded and where they were sourced from, the exact date they were uploaded, the source, the year, but also the boundary level or the address level at which you're uploading these indicators, what category they're in, all the information you might need. And then you have this button here allowing you to share with people within your team. So remember, all of these pages that you're seeing here are specific to the team that you are working within. And if you want to change that team, you go back here to the drop down, you select a different team, and you work with that one. But here we're looking at just my personal ones. You'll see a lot of tests and demos. But basically, when you want to share, you click share. And now that data set is available to all users within your team, not all users on Ladder. And if you want to revoke that, you can revoke the share by simply pressing it again. And then lastly, as I mentioned, the owner and the contributor have the ability, because they are the only ones who can upload, to delete a data indicator. So if you want to delete that indicator, it'll ask you again if you're sure it's irreversible. You'll have to go through all those lovely steps again, upload it. And once you do that, you'll see that the indicator is no longer there. And then actually one more thing. So there's also a profile page, which we want to be as transparent and allow you to, control your information as well. And so on this page, you can always edit your information, edit your email, change your password, add two-factor authentication, and also log out of other sessions if you want, more privacy or more trust within the session you're working within. And then lastly, you can manage kind of your team memberships from here. And then, of course, you can delete your account, and that will come with deleting information as well on our platform. Great. That is all I want to demonstrate here. I recognize that I just shared a lot. So while I'm still here sharing my screen, or Shayna, would it be best if I move forward with the presentation? I'll leave that up to you.
Yeah, just looking at the Q&A, and thanks everyone for putting your questions in. It actually may be a good time to take a look at some of the Q&A before going into the next section, since most of it seems to be coming from what you just shared. So let's see. There's a good question around, does the platform integrate with any other platforms like Salesforce, Power BI, etc.? Could we embed the map somewhere for partner use?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can feel that one. At the moment, the short answer is no. There is no direct integration into a Salesforce CRM or other platforms, but that is a common theme that we've heard. And the essence of Ladder right now is to allow you to upload data and integrate it and have that offering be available for you. In the future, we might look at ways to have direct software integration so that you can not only work with the data that you have stored within Ladder, but you can also integrate public indicators as well and have that show up in your business intelligence workflows or your databases or your systems that you already have. So that's where we're at with it. Great
Great.
question, though.
Thanks. There's a good question around, seems like it may be technically based. What is the software used to create Ladder? So that may be a tag team answer, Yash, from you and a colleague of ours that we do have online, Sophia. Yash, I'll see if you want to weigh in first, and then Sophia, if you're available to add any additional answers, feel free to do so.
Yeah, I will actually hand this off to Sophia because she could probably do a better job of explaining the nuances of it. Sophia, if you want to answer in the chat or come off mute, totally up to you.
Yeah, happy to. Um, so just looking at that most recent comment, I'll note that there are no restrictions on membership, and you're welcome to invite folks from any domain name to your team. And Sarah actually introduced a really cool thing, Yash, that it may be worthwhile to give a quick peek into. In the past, it has been necessary for users to to aggregate all of their data before upload. And now we do have an option to view an aggregation of address-based indicators within the boundary indicators. This is a brand new thing, so just want to highlight it because it's a very cool development that really grew out of the feedback that we received from you all, from our users. In the Q&A questions, I think folks found their way through this, the ability to cross-reference on race, ethnicity, language, and disaggregated demographic data. We do have some items in the population section of the boundary-based indicator dropdown that look at, for example, the percentage of one specific census designated race across a population. And if you find that anything, like any specific indicators are missing there that you'd like to see added, we really, really welcome that feedback. Definitely guides where we kind of go next. Yash, before I continue rolling through the questions in the Q&A, are there any in particular you want me to prioritize?
Yeah, Shayna, I think are there any other technical ones that stand out that you want to have Sophia field?
Yeah, I think there's a good one that commonly comes up around, tightly regulated data, such as health, documentation that can be provided to security teams around, any auditing security requirement needs. So that may be a both for you all to weigh in, but I'll start with Sophia on that.
Could you point me to the specific question there, Shayna? Sorry.
Sorry, it's the very last one around documentation. Okay. Yes, which I know we do have on our platform.
Got it. Okay. So I think the best thing to point folks to is what Yash mentioned around data ownership sitting in the hands of users. So we do ensure that you have the ability to delete any uploaded data. And I believe, Yash, we can provide documentation around what exactly that looks like for folks who have IT teams with specific requirements for what the tools they use, the third-party tools you all use, what happens when you click delete. So we can certainly provide more insight into that side of things. Ultimately, though, while we do, monitor for proper use, we're not looking at like the meaning behind the data that you're uploading. And so as the data owners, users hold responsibility for ensuring that, for example, PII is not uploaded to the tool.
Thanks for that, Sophia. Oh, sorry, Yash, did you want to add to that? Sorry.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to tag on that, like that to Sophia's point, if there are questions about that or we could support you in onboarding to your team, I think the best way to get in touch with us is this little button you'll always see here in the bottom right for the feedback button. It'll prompt you to a form. Just reach out, let us know how we can kind of sway you. We're working on more robust documentation for all of that, but just want to let you know that. And then also just that PII stands for personally identifiable information. So information about like a specific person, like their address or their name or social security or things like that. But thank you.
Thanks. There's a good question. Is there a row limit, file size limit for the upload?
That's a great question, and I'm not sure of the answer off the top of my head. I'm sure the answer is yes, there is a limit. I'm not sure what that limit is. So Yash, maybe we could follow up with the person who asked the question and get that answer to them later.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm smiling because that is a great question. I do not think we have reached that limit yet, either in internal development or with users. So that is probably a good sign. But I want to also just be cognizant that this tool is meant to be at the community level and to understand within a certain scope. you'll see that if you even zoom out enough on this tool, you won't get as useful of a picture if you're looking at certain boundaries, and they'll actually entirely disappear. So the goal really is to focus on communities, broader, maybe cities, a couple of cities, maybe a state if you're looking at counties. Yeah, you're welcome to try, and if you run into an issue, let us know. But that is a great question. I think we can get back to you on.
And kind of similarly, there's a couple of questions around restrictions on team membership. Like, is there max number of team or team members that can be added at a time?
Also a great question. Sophia will have to keep me honest here. But I mean, again, there is probably a literal limitation. I don't think I'm as concerned about the scale there because we're adding people individually. Um, that would be my response, but I'm also happy to look into that and provide further details.
Um, yeah, what you've said, Yash, is exactly correct. There's no technical limit. Like, when we're talking about the upload, there is a file size at which it's a really big file size, as you mentioned. But there's a point at which you can add more. That doesn't exist for teams. You can, in theory, add infinite users to your team. The limitation is just, as Yash said, at the moment, those team members are added manually one by one. So it may become a little tricky if you've got hundreds of users, but the tool will support it.
There's a question around, is there a way to share existing indicators across teams? So far, having to only upload them separately by team.
Yeah, that's a great question. And DataKind team, I'll have you keep me honest here as well. I do not think that is a feature we currently offer. But that is definitely an interesting insight that I don't think we've heard too often, actually. So would love to connect more on that and see how you would use it.
Yeah, and I think kind of going to that, that sort of goes back to if you're creating separate teams, right? Whether you have a team, for example, within an organization or across, we want to give that specific control to that team owner to be able to keep that in mind in terms of respective teams that they're creating. But yeah, great question. Um, so there's a question around uploading data for a particular year at a time. Or can you? Is it only for a particular year at a time?
Yeah, that's correct. The way the uploader flow works right now, you're always adding indicators. Well, it may be many indicators, always adding indicators for a specific source, which corresponds to a year. And so the thinking there is that you may want to come back and add a kind of parallel source for a subsequent year, but it is at the moment a separate upload. I would say, speaking from the engineering end of this and acknowledging that this is a tool under development, there's nothing that truly boxes us into that. What we're thinking about in the kind of design of that uploader is primarily like trying to keep things as straightforward as possible with all those different mappings required for each upload. So the decision made there is not one we absolutely have to stick with. And this is something that your work would really be well served by being able to upload multiple indicators to multiple years in a single uploader flow. We'd love to hear more about that and understand what that use case looks like and how we could kind of adapt the uploader as we look ahead to future versions of Ladder.
Great, such great questions. And as a friendly reminder, we do have about 30 minutes left, so we're still able to go through some of these questions here. There's a good question around if DataKind is planning to offer data sets at any finer level than census tract, like block group level. I can at least initially weigh in on that. Currently, we are prioritizing a beta feature around congressional districts. So right now, a lot of the feedback interest tends to be down to census tract and additional requests to see a congressional district layer there. But certainly, as people have additional feedback, that feedback button is available. We are engaging in some UX research as well, so we're getting additional feedback there. Yash or Sophia, anything to add to any context around that?
Yeah, I'll just add that Ladder, as Sophia mentioned, is a tool in development, and we're constantly looking for new ways to expand. So, as Shayna mentioned, if you reach out to us, we'd love to put you in the right feedback loop so we can understand better the use case for expanding. But it's certainly not out of reach due to any sort of literal limitation or anything there. It's just we started with a couple of useful ones that we found to be higher priority.
Yeah, I would say just one very, very small caveat on that. And I don't know that this is true for any of the indicators in our publicly available set. But as I think maybe the person who asked this may be aware, the ACS data that's driving our public data sets here does become, there are less indicators available as you get to more granular levels because of how they calculate things. And I think it really centers around ensuring that privacy can be maintained. And once we get down to the census block group, that gets a little trickier. So while we definitely always want to know what kind of boundaries, what sort of geography levels would be useful to folks, our set here was also selected with kind of an eye toward being able to maintain parity between the different boundaries. So what's available for census tracts is typically available for counties and vice versa. If we were to introduce census block groups in the future, there may be some indicators that just don't exist for that more granular level.
Great, thanks for that. We'll get to a couple more questions that we can. Just noting there were a couple of questions around kind of deeper questions around as they're utilizing the tool. So I put my email in the chat. Feel free to reach out to the team if you'd like more support as you go through the use of Ladder. There's a good question around, are there templates that can be used for uploading data sets? And I'll just in general mention, as a part of our UX research, we are looking at ways to support when you upload data. What are scenarios in which you may select one way to upload an indicator versus another? But feel free, Yash, if you'd like to add anything to that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that is definitely something that we are working to release as well as some materials around like a guide on how to upload and what all these different drop downs mean, as well as like a sample data set or two. So when you start to get into the tips I mentioned for uploading, like looking at your data ahead of time, changing column names, stuff like that, you can start to make it easier for you or your team along the way. So look out for this.
Yes. And another good question around Ladder essentially being focused around local data as opposed to looking at it from across state or a larger region. So just validating that with Ladder, it is designed primarily from the perspective of really looking at localized information, but absolutely can talk more around needs to look beyond that. So appreciate bringing that up as well. Are there any users who have shared using Ladder to support sharing impact and need to funders? So the short version is we're going to be looking to have deeper engagement to share those use cases in the next upcoming year. We've been engaging in a lot of great initial conversation where we're going to start to track and look at either highlighted learnings or those impact examples that was shared there. So thanks for mentioning that. And then the final question, there was a question around comparison of this tool to other commercially available tools like ArcGIS, and sort of like noting any differentiators. So just quickly highlighting, and Sophia and Yash, feel free to weigh in. One main advantage is this tool is being provided for free, with those capabilities of sharing. That was actually a pain point we heard from our partners, was in terms of paid licenses and how that may limit opportunities to collaborate. And so wanting to incorporate that feature within Ladder. But certainly, Yash or Sophia, if you'd like to add anything else.
Yeah, I definitely thought that was an interesting question. I think to answer kind of the last part of it, like why would you get a paid tool if you have this? My answer would simply be if you're at a point within your development and your growth where you feel like you want to scale the use cases. Ladder, while we believe to be a very effective tool and certainly meant to be a free of cost, has its limitations, as you're kind of hearing with these questions and answers. Like it may not have the direct boundaries you're looking at, or it might not have other things. What we are trying to curate here specifically is definitely an experience where people can understand their communities from different aspects. And so I think one of the differentiators as well is also the fact that this comes handy with public indicators. And that's something that we're constantly looking to update, add to with feedback. And so the idea here is to mix both and have that readily available. So you're not ingesting and having to create a data warehouse for public data and then being able to display it on something like ArcGIS. Or working with indicators they have, we're looking to curate a very unified perspective on it. But certainly, if you feel like we would recommend, if you're at a level, of course, where you feel like the capabilities aren't meeting there and you feel like something else might be a better tool, like, there definitely are tools out there with perhaps more advanced capabilities or software integrations or a lot of the things that have been mentioned in the Q&A. That's a great question.
Yeah, I'd just add to that. I come from a GIS background, and tools like ArcGIS are so valuable and bring a lot to the table. But one thing we hear often is that they're really alienating to a lot of folks, because it is kind of like that is the professional niche. If you're working in GIS, that's what you do. And what we're really interested in with Ladder is having a tool that is cross-functional across teams at organizations who are doing work on the ground. And so, rather than having something that may be able to perform like more complex geospatial analysis, but sits in the hands of one person on your team, our hope is that Ladder is something that folks across your team are able to like come to a point of comfort with. And so we can kind of bring that expertise from all the different corners of your team together to where everyone's using the tool directly, as opposed to kind of receiving the analysis that one or two individuals are generating in GIS. Also an excellent tool, huge fan of ArcGIS. But we're hoping that our kind of differentiator here is that Ladder speaks to a really wide audience, and empowers each individual on your team to contribute to analysis.
Okay,
Great
great.
question.
There were so many good questions there. Appreciate that. And we'd like, just before coming up next, we're going to have Yash come back and kind of go through a walkthrough of an exercise in case you want to follow along or use this recording to practice. But we definitely want to also get a pulse check just based on all of the things that you've heard. Want to get a sense of your knowledge. Do you feel that you've learned something? Maybe it's the same, or you're not sure. So again, anonymous answers, we want to get a sense of, did you learn something new coming out of this conversation? And on what range, or did it feel very similar to perhaps what you've learned before? We always want to make sure that we're being mindful of how we approach the content that we share with you all today. And that in part is driven by your feedback. So we've got some folks voting. We'll give it just a couple more seconds. Okay, it looks like things are slowing down, and it looks like the majority of you have learned something new, which is great. Some have mentioned it's about the same. I'm not sure. You might be a processor like me. I always like to digest information, and there is nothing wrong with that. So, thanks for participating in that. And then I just have one other question. Do you think that how likely are you to incorporate what you learned today in your work? On the scale from very likely to not at all likely, there's no right or wrong answer, by the way. This is really just an opportunity to share insights today and see where it applies within your work. So we'll allow a couple of seconds for everyone to weigh in. Okay, we'll go ahead and end the poll and share the results. It looks like there's a majority overall that do see opportunities where they can incorporate what they learned today into their work, which is always positive to hear and what we aim for in uh, our webinar today. So with that said, I'm going to turn it back to Yash. He's going to go through just a walkthrough of a sample way that you can use Ladder. You can follow along, but we'll also share the recording and the slides. So again, this is all in the effort of supporting being able to utilize the tool. So I'll turn it back over to you, Yash, if you'd like to share your screen as well.
Yeah, for sure. First of all, can everyone still see my screen? Get a thumbs up.
I can see the feedback slide, if that's you.
Okay. Okay. Yes. Lovely. Okay. Yeah. Hello again, everyone. The next part I want, as Shayna mentioned, is to be more of a practical walkthrough for those of you who are maybe new to Ladder or want to really walk through a specific case. So I'll be pausing and I'll be sharing resources that you can use to get started. First of all, if you haven't already, please register for Ladder because I'll be starting at a point where you already have an account and you're at the page. But for this, I want to walk through a hypothetical use case. So if I were a food bank working in the St. Louis area and I wanted to collaborate with federally qualified health centers in the area to encourage utilization and understand where program delivery can be most effective, this is kind of a set of steps I would go through. First, I want to just mention that there's a data set here we'd love for you guys to download, go to the site, follow along with me. It'll be the same one I'll be using in my demonstration. Shayna, if you could post that link into the chat for folks so they can download it ahead of time, that would be great while I kind of explain the scenario. So the first step you would do when you come to a situation like this is to define what your community is. So in this case, we'll be working locally within a specific zip code, and we want to look at the census tract level because we want to understand as closely as we can to how different neighborhoods differ and understand where there are less federally qualified health centers, but a greater need or perhaps a greater prevalence of some health conditions. And the second thing is defining what you want to do with information, right? So you have this data set of federally qualified health centers, which will be individual addresses, but you also want to capture information on health to understand, as I mentioned, where there's a prevalence of heart disease and diabetes within your community. Lastly, you want to, select and prepare what assets you want to identify. In this case, it would be those locations or those pins for healthcare centers or free and charitable clinics. And then you want to develop a plan, right? Where can you find the data on these health issues? Where can you add it? Like you might want to play around with Ladder a little bit, as Sarah had mentioned, to further, refine your understanding of it. And then you want to collect and format your assets. And so that will be already done for you in today's demonstration. If you go to the link, you should be able to download, I think it's an Excel file, and you should be able to follow along. All right. I'm going to switch back over to Ladder once again. And so for those of you who may have joined late, the upload button where you can upload data to Ladder is located in the top right of the page. When you get to this stage, you want to select from your computer that file. And so you'll find one, or if you've downloaded it or you're following along, that list of federally qualified health centers in the St. Louis area. So once you open that up, you should see a preview of a couple of rows of that data with the column headers, with all the column values, and hopefully everything looks pretty much the same as mine. If it doesn't, let me know. And then the next thing you want to do, since you are arriving at this new and it's a new project for you and your organization, you want to add to a new indicator rather than an existing one. So you would select that option. And Shannon, just keep me honest by interrupting me if there's a question I can do. I want to make sure that those who are encouraged to follow along in this stage are able to do so. The next step would be to select what your geography type is, right? So in this case, we're looking at where those pins of these health centers exist, right? So in that case, you saw there's a couple of boundaries. There's county, zip code, and census tract. Those deal with aggregate data points for a specific geographical area. An address is a specific pin on the map. So in this case, you'll be adding an address data set to your ladder team. Next, you want to identify a source. We're going to make one up because this is a hypothetical situation. And the year that the data, ideally with data year, you want to use the year the data was published so that your team knows what year that's in reference to. You could use the year you're uploading it, but it would be, my tip would be to use the year that the data is published so that people know when they're comparing different data sets, okay, this may have changed or this may not have changed. Next, you want to identify details about the address, again, to map to ladders, data framework, our data schema to make sure that everything that can be validated and added to ladder can be. So you want to add the facility, which if you look back up the data set is the name of these health centers. This will be the name of the site or the address. Next, you want to add the street address. And in this case, we call that in our data set address, and you want to map that to the street name and number. Next, you want to add the city column, which maps directly to city, state maps to state, and zip. And with all those pieces of information, we should be able to match that to a direct longitude and latitude on the map and be able to present those pins for you. I want to pause here for a second. I know this can be a little overwhelming to do for the first time, so everyone just take a deep breath with me. All right, moving on. You want to name what that indicator is if you do want to. So very qualified. I have been. Okay. And then for the address indicators, you don't necessarily have to upload a numerical value. You can, in which case you will get more dots, which are based on the size of that value. So let's say like you want to understand how many people these health centers served, not just understand where they are on the map, but how many people are there, and you want to see that as like another display. You can add that as a numerical value here. We don't currently have that in our data set. But you could then see on the map like also how many people are being served by that location. I'm going to select none, which is just a way to have just the pin and that being the way data is represented. And then secondly, this will be in the health category. So this will appear in my health dropdown when I go back to the map analysis page. And if you want to add any notes, like let's say, I believe there is a phone number somewhere here. If you want to have that available for your team, so that they know, okay, we recognize this is an area, we want to talk to someone working there and get on the phone with them to better understand what the needs are of the community. You go ahead and add that so it appears on that tooltip when you hover over. All right, the next step is to run the validation. What this will do specifically for addresses, it'll map to a specific longitude and latitude value, as you see here, and that'll appear on the map as such. In this case, we don't have any exceptions, but there is a chance that you run into that issue again. So again, I just encourage you to pause at this frame. I just identify certain locations are not going to be uploaded so that when you get to that stage of looking at it on a map, you're not wondering why there's not those 2 or 3 health centers that you already know about. If you want to, you can download that again as a CSV. And if you're running into the same exception over and over again, please feel free to hit the feedback button. And when you do, it would be extremely useful for us to have this downloaded CSV of the exception so we can see exactly what's going on. But we encourage you to just, if you see addresses that are not being mapped correctly, type them into Google first, just see if there's any random like periods or dashes or something in between there that gets added. Data can be kind of tricky to prepare. Once you're there, you want to click upload to hopefully successfully upload your data. And once that's done, as you guys might be familiar with already, you can go directly to our map and you can see where that is. In this case, as I mentioned in the example, we're working with the St. Louis, Missouri area. And so once you're here, you can see those health centers pop up on the map. And so if you want to just look at this, you can start to understand where they are, make sure that there's not one in your area that should be there and you tried to upload but isn't there. Just verify that all these steps just validate the data you're seeing and make sure that it's in alignment. But once you do that, as I mentioned, the goal here is to overlay that with some indicators that help you show which areas have a higher prevalence of heart disease as well as diabetes, so you can understand where to target your programs. So I'm going to go back to here and re-add that map of health centers, and then you're going to go to our drop down here, and again, you'll see kind of throughout there's a mix of public and private indicators. You'll see the private ones indicated by a lock icon and the ones that are public with a globe icon. And so as I mentioned, we're looking specifically at this scenario, in this hypothetical scenario, at heart disease. So you're going to select one of the indicators, allow that to load first before you click too many of them. The next one will be diagnoses of diabetes in the area by the CDC. So once you have that, you can start to get a picture of what your map looks like. And I want to make sure you guys can see the legend as well. So what you see here is a heat map, right? That is, as Sarah had mentioned in their example, a cross section between two of these indicators. And so when you want to look for what areas have the highest prevalence of heart disease and what areas have the highest diagnoses of diabetes, you're going to look for this purple pinkish shade here, and typically darker means a higher value for that value as well. And so as you're going through here, the goal again is to see where you can start to connect with organizations in an area, or where you can start to see their gaps in service delivery or areas you might be able to explore further. So if you look at this, a couple of places come to mind, right? If you look at the census tract here, and I'm not too familiar with the St. Louis area, so keep me honest, all of you. But there's a census tract here that has particularly high prevalence of both heart disease and diabetes for the year that the data set was published, and it doesn't seem to have one of those health centers from the data set that we uploaded. And so as you start to play around with it, as you start to understand the nuances of the platform, you'll start to be able to hopefully gather and gain insights that you can bring back to your team on how to focus your program delivery. Okay, I will now officially pause there and see if there's any questions.
Great. And I'll just note what I put in the chat. Thanks so much, Yash. We recognize that people like to try out tools in different ways. So whether it was following along with Yash or wanting to look at it at a time that works for you, that's where we'll provide the recording and slides and access to those sample data sets to follow along. Let me just check and see. I think there's a general, this kind of reminds me of a general question, Yash, just around data sets that can be uploaded and sort of what are useful data guidelines, practices that we want to ensure around uploading data if it's publicly available or through a partnership. Yeah, invite thoughts around like just general practices to keep in mind.
Yeah, that's a great question. There's actually a slide in reference to that exactly that maybe I can just briefly go over because I think it covers a lot of that, right? So when we think about uploading data, you always want to make sure you prepare your data before uploading and check where possible if there's information that's personally identifiable or protected health information or something that could be sensitive before you upload to Ladder or any other tool like ArcGIS if you're using that. Secondly, you want to minimize data. So the data you might be getting from someone else or might be generated in a report might have extraneous data fields or columns that you might not need. And we would encourage you to minimize the data set as much as possible before uploading it or performing any analyses. Thirdly, and the third point and an important one, I think, to this question is make sure that you or your organization have the proper permission and consent for uploading any data. So that also applies to public or data you get from a different source. If you go to that site, make sure you look at the license for how you can share or upload this data before you do so on Ladder or otherwise. And then if it's your own organizations, make sure you work with your legal team, leadership, whoever it is, to make sure that you have permission to share it. And then lastly, as I mentioned along the way, just review your uploaded data and then, limit the amount that your organization and your team can actually use by using that privilege and that role function. And then report any issues. Use that feedback form liberally, and please get to us with any thoughts or questions.
Great. Thanks so much for that, Yash. Let me share my screen as we wrap up today's conversation. We really appreciate you joining us. As was mentioned, I'll be sure to share the recording and slides. It'll likely come through the Eventbrite registration. We send that there. We're also going to create a YouTube playlist, so you'll be able to access this webinar as well as the others. Continue to invite your colleagues. We still have one more webinar that is occurring December 9th. Continue to explore Ladder, try the demo exercises, reach out if you do have any questions. But yes, our next webinar is going to be December 9th from 10 to 11:30 a.m. Central Time. This is going to be an exciting opportunity to have some conversation around learning from peers. What have you learned as a part of attending this series? We're also going to have some guest speakers share their perspective, even other tools that they've come across that have helped enable looking at analyzing local community data. So it's really going to be a great forum opportunity to share thoughts, exchange ideas, and provide a space for that knowledge sharing. So we truly thank you all for joining us today. We realize this session was a little bit longer and many of you have stuck it out with us. And again, just really want to thank all of the speakers today, Jen Rose, Sarah, Yash, Sophia for jumping in and sharing some answers to you all's questions. So until then, please expect that email within the next day or so with the recordings, and please join us.